So in the past couple of weeks, we've talked about my karate, jiu-jitsu, and kobudo background. So this week, let's talk about my Filipino martial art background. Hey, what's up? I'm Ken. This is kenfuTV, and each week I release videos in the martial arts, philosophy, technique, training, that sort of thing. And if that's what you're into, I hope that you stick around, subscribe, like this video if it's something that you got value out of. Drop a comment down below to tell me about your background. What kind of martial arts do you do? Okay, so the Filipino martial arts, commonly referred to as Filipino stick fighting, but the arts themselves are much deeper than that. There's so much more to them than that. They are, in fact, complete arts. The one that I have studied for a number of years now is TOBOSA'S ESCRIMA, named after the founder of that style, Batikan Raymond Tobosa. It has a second name. The second name is Kasag, and that's the name of the system, Kasag meaning the crab, because there's a lot of attributes that come from the crab and from time spent observing the crab that have lent themselves to different parts of the methodology and the movement. So it became the perfect kind of, not really a mascot, but the symbol of the style itself and what it is. This particular logo was one that I designed for our local group, built it as a mnemonic to also include a lot of the things that we've got to remember as part of the style, the different things that we've got. So you'll see different logos, different places, because the logos have changed over the years, and then also there's obviously mine, which is local. My lineage to the art came by way of Guru John Balcerzak and his instructor, Maestro Michael Mulconnery, out of Idaho. He's the mainland director for the style. The style itself came to the US by way of Hawaii. The Tobosa bloodline continues to live on in Hawaii, and the art continues to grow there as well. There are a number of schools throughout the US, but not a huge amount. I first started the art because somebody that I worked with, his uncle was Guru John. He said, "Oh man, you do all this martial arts. I bet you'd really like to meet my uncle. I bet you guys would get along. He does this stuff with sticks. You know, I think you'd really love it." And so I took him up on it. I said, "Yeah, let's go see him." And the rest is history. I've been doing Kasag ever since. The experience itself was somewhat surreal. We grabbed a 6-pack of beer. We went over to Guru John's house, and he shared the art with me. We were hitting sticks together while he's smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer, and we're talking, and he's sharing all of this stuff. And something about that just felt really appropriate. And the more I learn about the Filipino culture and the attitude of those martial arts, the fact that the Filipino martial arts have a way of being a lot more laid back than some of the traditional, especially traditional Japanese styles, it just felt very appropriate. And it was just super interesting because as time went on, the things that he did, right, and time went on that night, you know, a couple more beers in him, right, and little sheets to the wind, his motions, we were doing some sticky hands, we're doing some different things, and it just, all of the automatic things that he did were just perfect. They made me very, very interested in understanding more about how all this works and what this is all about. So continued training. And it turns out at that time they were training in a wrestling room in a school after hours. And then in the summer they would train in a parking garage. And we'd train, we'd hit sticks, we'd work out for a couple hours, and then everybody'd go to their car, grab a cooler, we'd have a few beers and talk and chat. And that was just kind of the culture of it. The culture was very conversational, very familial. You know, you were part of a family. Dojos always have this, we're part of a family thing, but this was different. It truly felt like that. You know, you were talking stories and you had a tendency to do things over food, and just that environment was different. And I loved it. But the martial art itself, TOBOSA'S ESCRIMA, and the methodology, it opened my eyes to a completely different system, a completely different way of approaching the martial arts altogether. I had come from an idea that the way you approach it is, okay, we'll look at certain types of attacks, we'll look at certain types of movement and deal with that. So if I throw this kind of punch, you know, here's a way that you could deal with that punch. If I grab you in this way, here's a way I can deal with that. But at the outset, the thing that really struck me differently and something that has stuck with me and even changed how I approach teaching all of the arts that I teach is the concept of angles. Filipino martial arts, everybody knows they've got the angles. You know, in this case, you've got the cincoteros, the 5 strikes, right? That particular numerata, that particular pattern is very common in many of them. Though some people have different ones, and most systems have maybe a 12 count. They might not have less than that, they might not have more than that, and it might not be 12, it might be a different number, but 12 is pretty common, and the first 5, from my understanding, from my research, the first 5 is pretty, I won't say universal, it's pretty common, that order of a downward diagonal from the right-hand side being angle 1, a downward diagonal from the left-hand side being angle 2, some horizontals and a thrust. After that it might change and it varies, it depends on the style that you're learning and how that goes, and even that could be different. Even in our own, we have different ones where maybe it comes down and then number 2 is returning back. That wasn't the thing that stuck out to me. The thing that stuck out to me was the methodology, the idea was based on the angle. The angle 1 did not represent, this is just the first attack that you learn how to do. It represented an approach, a trajectory, an arc. So the way that it's looked at is the idea of that trajectory, of that angle, of the arc itself, its length, its distance, its proximity, all of those things just make up what it is, this diagonal motion. Well, in that diagonal motion is everything. So rather than breaking down an art into, well, if I punch you do this, if I palm heel you would do this, if you kick you do this, instead, is it entering along angle 1? Then deal with it the way that you deal with angle 1. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if I throw a big high kick that's coming down into angle 1, deal with it the same way. If I've got a big baseball bat, angle 1. If I'm throwing a big looping hook, angle 1. I've got these same ideas, same motions. And then the other angles fill out the other ways that things could enter. And instead of learning 10,000 different responses to 10,000 different stimulus, instead it's, here's the number of angles. There's only so many ways something can approach you. And let's look at how to deal with that and our relationship to it. Do we let it pass by or do we confront it? Which has some philosophical ideas to it too, right? Do I let this slide off or do I confront it now? But more on that in a minute. Hey guys, Ken from the future. I was just editing this video and realized that I never actually came back to that, so let me just talk about it really quick. One of the things about this particular art, Kasag itself, Bodikan himself, and thusly Maestro Mike, and other people in the art, one of the things about it is its strong connection to the character building of people, and not just in lifting up somebody's character, which I believe most, if not all, martial arts focus on, but instead the idea of the moral imperative that the ethics and the morality of a person is paramount to whether or not they should even receive the art. And through that, there's a strong focus on developing a strong-minded person who understands the responsibility of someone who's learning an art like this. And it was typically done in a small group for that reason, so that great care could be taken with the people who are learning the art to make sure that they're going the right way and following the right path and not deviating or potentially using the art for a bad purpose. That's something that really stuck with me and became something that I really cared a lot about, which is not just teaching the art for the art's sake, but also making sure that people doing it are growing with a good moral compass so that they can help people in the ways that people should be helped and not use the art in the ways it shouldn't be used. Stuff that I find really important, but not every art includes. In fact, I think because of the nature of that kind of topic, many arts disinclude it specifically, but this one doesn't. It's right there in the grading. There's a component to the grading that is paying attention to the growth of a person as a person and how they're growing up in the art and what the art is becoming for them in their life. And I find that just incredible and very, very cool and inspiring in a lot of ways. So since I didn't say that in the previous video, I just wanted to jump back and drop that in here. So right now we'll jump back to past Ken and let him finish telling you about the art itself. So I absolutely love that. I absolutely love how simple something can be. The idea of it creates the surface of the water, and it has the ability to just go so deep because there's so many ways to approach that. There's so many ways to deal with it. The art itself also follows a concept of drilling, and that the drills represent an acquirement of skill. But very importantly, those drills, and the drills, you've probably seen them. You see them in movies, you see them in TV shows. If you know somebody that does Filipino martial arts, you've probably seen them, and especially if you've seen demonstrations, you've seen them. In fact, in a lot of cases, other martial arts that integrate the Filipino martial arts to what they do tend to have drills, like Sinawali or Hubad Lubad, things like that carry over, and maybe they just have those couple drills. But the drills were never meant to be it. The drills represented the skill, and in a lot of cases, different things get dropped into those drills. So you might have one drill, take Hubad Lubad. Hubad Lubad might have its first iteration, the one that everybody's seen and knows, but there's dozens of ways to do that drill. All of them building in a mechanic, a memory, a method in which of using your body, right? And I find that to be very, very interesting, very cool. And yes, every art has different ways of doing stuff like that. They have drills, they have forms, they have things. And this is no different. It has the same things. In fact, the founder himself had a background in traditional martial arts karate and jiu-jitsu. His first style that he taught was one called Kaji-Kumi, and Kaji was a acronym for Karate, Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, and Eskrima, and the Kumi just meant the group, right? So it was a Karate, Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, Eskrima group, and it combined the things that he did. Coincidentally, and this is just an aside, my background started off with karate. I spent some time, and I'll probably be doing another video on this other art, which is Aikido. I spent some time with an Aikido instructor. The karate included Jiu-Jitsu, and then later I incorporated in my training through our connections through the WKKJO video here, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but especially the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu integrated into the karate. And then Eskrima, the I was the Visayan spelling, started with an I for Eskrima rather than an E for Eskrima. And so when you look at me and my collection of arts, the arts that I do, without knowing any of this ahead of time, Karate, Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, Eskrima are the ones that I did. So that made me very interested in digging deeper into understanding that and how that all went together. But it also meant that all of those pieces played a role in who Batikan was and how he did what he did. So things felt familiar. They had a level of familiarity to things that I already did because of, we'll call it a shared background, a shared history. As by his design, the Kaji eventually drifted away and the Eskrima remained, and components of the Kaji that were important became part of the Eskrima that continued to be passed on to people. Kaji itself not done nearly as prevalently as it had been. The Eskrima replaced it. Kasag became the main style and almost to the point of the only style. So it just clipped in. When I first started, one of the people that I trained with who also did Okinawa Kempo looked at me and he said, here's where you're going to learn your karate. And he was right. It was my opportunity. I love the analogy of the mountain and the different styles of your art being the paths up the mountain. And all of them are leading to the same place. They're just taking different ways to get there. Some more direct, some more esoteric, different ways of doing it, different scenery. But then a different art being a nearby mountain. In this case, the Eskrima was my nearby mountain. It gave me the ability to see my karate, my jiu-jitsu, all of those things from a different perspective. See them in a big picture, see them from afar, and come to understand how they played. So there was a lot of learning that took place in the Eskrima for my other arts. And I really, really loved that. And I'm thankful for it because it gave me a deeper understanding. Not only training that art developed a deeper understanding of the Eskrima, it gave me a deeper understanding of the other arts that I practice. The attributes of the art, the things besides the idea of the angles, it itself is a low to the ground, explosive, sharp movement, very directional, very fast, incredibly coordinated. When you train it, the coordination that develops is just incredible. But because of the idea of the angles, it incorporates weapons from day one, which is backwards from most arts, and works closer. So in this case, TOBOSA'S Kale Eskrima specifically started largo mono at that long hand range and worked closer into medio, closer into corto, and then continued from there. So you started with a longer stick. Later you introduce the idea of a longer stick and a dagger, then maybe just a dagger, then maybe just empty hand. And so each time you're starting from the furthest range where you're the most safe, and you're able to manage things by just not being in the way of them, to getting closer where things are happening faster and where the dangers you're not actually getting entirely away from them, to even closer than that. And so your weapons are getting shorter, and not necessarily, you can still use the long weapons in those ranges, but it changes. The attributes of that changes. Over that time, you're progressing naturally to a more dangerous, more fast-paced situation. And I find that scalability, the way that develops, to be incredibly interesting and incredibly efficient. But along the way, you learn how to develop skills with anything you pick up. You know, some of the comments that you'll hear about the Filipino martial arts is, yeah, but when are you going to have a stick? It doesn't have to be a stick. The way I operate my hand, if I hold a stick and I can strike, well, what's the difference between me just using the fist to strike this way, or using a flashlight to hit, or a knife, or whatever it is? All of those different attributes apply regardless of what's in my hand, but there are things around in any environment. Pick up a rock. It's the same things. The angles are going to deal the same way. How I deal with you and how I deal with your angles and how I deal with my own angles, all those things are going to be the same regardless. So instead of learning a dozen different pieces of arts that kind of bolt onto each other and become one mega art, right? Having flashbacks to the Power Rangers and all that stuff. Instead, you're learning one art and its ability to apply to all things. Just incredibly interesting, incredibly valuable. I really like the way that it applies, and if I'm honest, it's just fun. The Filipino martial arts, because of that more casual nature, more laid back, less formal atmosphere, it just lends itself to a more laid back and fun training experience. Karate can be very serious and in some cases very stiff. I try not to have it be that way for myself and for the people who train with me. And maybe that's a holdover from the Filipino martial arts. And just because in the Filipino martial arts, it's just way more laid back. You know, you're joking, you're laughing, you're training. It's a serious art and you treat it seriously. You develop a serious understanding, but you develop a comfort that allows for that casual nature to be a part of it. And I just love it. It's very good. That seriously rounds out a big part of what I do. Again, like I said, Aikido is the last piece, and so next week's video will be in the Aikido to talk about where I learned my Aikido and how that integrated. Some of you may even have questions on that because Aikido gets a lot of flack from other martial arts styles, saying that it's not practical, it's not effective, and you can't really use it. I disagree and have reasons for feeling that way, but that's another video. So there you have it. There's my thoughts and feelings on the Filipino martial arts that I do, and that kind of rounds out the core 3 arts, the karate, the jiu-jitsu, and the ESCRIMA that I do, that kind of make up what I refer to when I refer to kenfu, which is just me. Being me and having my way of doing things. Those are the parts that have made who I am. Those are the pieces of the environment who have grown me to being what I am and doing the things that I do. So I really hope that you've been enjoying this series. Like I said, there's one more. We'll do that one next. If you have questions, by all means, ask them. Drop in the comments how your journey looks like and what you've learned along the way and what you like about your stuff. But in the meantime, if you like this kind of video, you like these kind of things, or you like the stuff that I do, be sure to subscribe right here. There's a playlist of videos like this one right here, and you can grab a couple more videos that I think you might like right here. I'm Ken, this is kenfuTV, and I'll catch you in the next one.